We're going to have all kinds of different folks join us.
Speak about solutions and why we're doing this moving forward.
I'm thinking about language of inclusion right now.
Unlocking potential, breaking barriers. Join us on the Talk Able podcast, where abilities shine. Now, here's our hosts.
Welcome to the Able Podcast. This podcast series showcases innovations happening around disabilities and anything that can help in the world of disabilities. Today's podcast is for the Mental Health Awareness Month, which has been a cornerstone of addressing the challenges faced by millions of people living with mental health conditions. My name is April. I'm the Associate Merchant of the Breakfast Team and Market Division. I've been with the company for 4 years and very excited to be in Able. I do have mental illness and mobility issues. This adds in being an advocate for those who do need help. My co-host is Chris Bailey. Tell us about yourself.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? It's Chris Bailey back at you. Excited about another episode of Pod Able here at the Able Pillar. If you don't know me, I'm a 9-year resident here at Loblaws. I'm the current store manager of Dominion Store 935 in St. John's, Newfoundland. Super happy to be part of the Able Pillar, getting the message out. And today I think we have a very, very important message, April, and that's mental health. And I think we have a very, very special guest here to join us today.
Our special guest is Nathalie Gervals. She is a registered nurse and director of the medical services team. Over her 17 years with Loblaw and a 25-year nursing career, Nathalie, along with the occupational health nurses from medical services, have played a significant role in supporting and guiding colleagues and leaders as we have dealt with the ever-changing world that causes an increase in stress, anxiety, and coping difficulties. She was a mental health first aid instructor under the Canadian Mental Health Commission and strong promoter of mental health in the workplace. She is a member of the enterprise-wide Mental Health Strategy Committee and a subject matter expert on the topic of mental health in the workplace. She's very excited to join this conversation around mental health and raising awareness and encouraging everyone to take action to fight the stigma associated with mental health challenges. Welcome, Nathalie.
Thanks for having me.
We're really excited to have you.
Absolutely.
So today we are going to be talking about mental health. But there are some stats that I found on CAMH about mental health and mental illness. Not everyone has mental health and will experience challenges regarding their mental well-being, but not everyone will experience a mental illness. Mental illness indirectly affects all Canadians at some time, either through their own experience or that of a family member, friend, or colleague. In any given year, 1 in 5 people in Canada will personally experience a mental health problem or illness. So what exactly is the difference between mental health and mental illness, Nathalie?
So I'll start by saying that everyone has mental health. Not everyone has mental illness. So we'll just preface that way. But mental health is a state of well-being that enables us to cope with the stressors in life. So it's the way that we react, how we feel, how we think when we're faced with the daily stressors that everybody has to face. And depending on how our stress response is, it will determine if we have like good coping mechanisms that will help us manage all of those things. And if we don't, there might be a mental illness that is underlying. So basically, we kind of split those into like mental health problems versus mental health disorders, because everyone has had a mental health problem in their lives. Not everybody has had a mental health disorder. And the difference is for a problem, everybody has experienced loss, grief. Sometimes people will have go through divorce, and those stressors in life or those major changes in life will cause us to have difficulties dealing with our emotions, and our stress will be there's going to be a spike in our stress response, but it can dissipate and disappear after a short period without having any type of medical interaction. Versus a disorder that will cause like major changes in individuals' thinking, emotional state, behaviors, and it will disrupt all of the relationships. So work relationships, friends, family, and it typically involves the need for a medical diagnosis and some form of treatment. So an intervention, whether it's medication or some therapy. But that is basically the difference between everybody who has mental health and may have mental health problems. Everybody has had a mental health problem. But that's the difference between mental health disorder as well.
I find that fascinating. Do you think that if you don't take care of your mental health, can you go into a disorder at that point?
I would say if you do not take care of yourself and you continue to have to deal with the stressors, eventually I would say that chances are that you will develop a disorder.
Yeah.
So yes.
Yeah, and I think we're talking about a subject here that I think it definitely has a stigma around it. Depending on your introduction to mental health, depending on, I guess, your generation you grew up in, your upbringing, your surroundings, there's so many things that impact your mental health. And so coming from somebody who was, I guess, born in the '70s, raised in the '80s. It was one of those things that I think wasn't openly spoken about. You know what I mean? It was just something that was not talked about. It was put over to the side. Sometimes you would think that, oh, someone has something wrong with them. You know what I mean? And unfortunately, a lot of folks got put in a box because of that. You know what I mean? As we progressed into the '90s, we got this, we got on the topic of mental health. We started having open discussions about, being able to treat these disorders in a proper manner without you're trying to break down the stigma. In the 2000s now, we have a really, really open discussion. I mean, we have all kinds of things. We have mental health programs that didn't exist before. Counseling has gone to a new level. We're seeing it appear because people are just openly talking about it now. Whereas back when I went to school, it wasn't something that I would be comfortable or, as the tough guy with the, your dad didn't tell you, boys don't cry. Boys don't cry, darn it. You know what I mean? So I think we're in a position now where we can have these discussions. We can help people. And it's no longer a thing where it's a foreign object. It's a thing where we can help each other. And I think that when we have conversations like these, I think it's going to help somebody just hearing this message today to find out information, to get help, to understand that this is not something that's wrong with you. It's something that, you might need help working through. It might need some advice, some tools to put yourself on the right track. And I think that that's why I found it was super important to be part of this conversation today.
Yeah, because stigma is unfortunately still present. It's going to take a while before we see a major change in our society around mental health, because we still have people from the '70s and '80s in our workplaces and in our families, and that still have this stereotype in their mind that you're not pulling your weight, you're doing it on purpose, you're doing it out of spite, or you just need to pull your socks up, or what all of these things, right? So until we educate people, until we show the awareness, until people learn that these types of situations are not something that we choose to have. We don't choose to break our leg when we're going downhill skiing. Well, you don't choose to get a diagnosis of depression if your background kind of determines, basically your genes determine that you might develop this disease, right? Or that you have all these stressors coming at you and you don't have the resources, because not everybody has a family doctor. Not everybody can leave work in the middle of the day to go to an appointment. Like, there's so many things that are preventing people from getting the support that they need, even though we're going to talk about resources at the end, I believe, but there's still some limitations to how people can access care, and that causes them to remain ill, unfortunately, sometimes. And then you still have those folks that need to learn about the fact that people are not doing this on purpose, right? Like, people can feel shame, they can be blamed, they feel hopeless, they have low self-esteem, nobody understands them. All of those things are still present, unfortunately. Less and less, I have to say, because we're working really, really hard to share our awareness and education around mental health, especially at Loblaw. So we're working super hard to get that message down, but it's still a little bit of a struggle. So we do have some modules on Academy that could help. So there's a stigma busting module on Academy that I would recommend everybody kind of sit through, because it's just a little bit of an eye-opening module. It's about 10 minutes. Super recommend to everyone, and it was developed by my fabulous team, so I will promote that. And until we have removed all the stigma around mental health, people with mental illness or mental health issues will have difficulties dealing with that, because there is that resistance and there is that barrier that prevents them from jumping over that hump, because they feel like they're not part of the group, or they feel all alone on their little island. So how do we stop stigma? Eventually it'll be by educating people, and also calling out those behaviors when we see them that are stigmatizing. So if you are in the presence of someone who's talking negatively about someone who is ill, and you're not saying anything, or you're not trying to at least educate that person on the fact that this is an illness and it's not something that somebody chooses to have, then you would be part of the problem, right? So basically we're in a blue culture. There's nice ways of saying things, and there's that collaborative candor piece that I think we should always pull on, to say, can you please just like rephrase that and try to think about what you just said, and kind of, I don't want to call out people in front of a group, but maybe it's to take that person to the side and say, I didn't really feel comfortable when you said that earlier, because I don't know, I've had my struggles, or somebody in my family has a struggle, and I feel like you're judging without knowing the full picture. So in a nutshell, stigma is still around, but it's on us to try to remove it. And there are some tools that we have that would help us to try to remove the stigma around this category of diagnosis.
I like what you had to say about just how to talk to someone who may be saying something negative. I've had to deal with my family and understanding major depressive disorder, and that it is a chemical imbalance. I do take medications to regulate, and my dad will come at me with these crazy ideas of something that's going to fix it, and I have to re-explain. Yes, diet's very important. Exercise. These are really good for your mental health. This helps clear everything up. But when you have a disorder, you do need medication, and you need, just to make sure you see your psychiatrist. And I mean, I am taking care of myself, and I actually do say I appreciate you looking into his dad, because I know that he cares, but he still has this idea that it can just go away.
Right.
Just like that, eating apple a day. I don't know, but it's still his unbiased, his bias there, that he, he's a generation ahead of me, and he's, he was the one, pick up your bootstraps and get going. Stop crying. Don't worry about it. It'll pass. When sometimes you need help.
Right.
So it's the biggest stigma busting right there. Is it's okay to not be okay, and it's perfect time to go get some help.
Right. And it's okay to learn new things when you're older as well, and try to see it from a different lens. And that's the biggest, I want to say, hurdle in our culture, or in our generational differences, right? So and we have like all of the generations right now in our workplace. So the struggle is real.
Oh yeah. And I think we got to really put where we're living in context. I mean, this is unprecedented times. We came out of a pandemic. We've never faced that before in our lifetime, and the stresses that came with that, the unexpected that came with that. You couldn't prepare for some of this stuff. You know what I mean? Not only could you not prepare, but you were never given the tools to have to cope with it. Like, who knew? Who had the playbook of how to deal with a pandemic and how to be okay in a pandemic? People were frightened. People were terrified. People lost family members. How do you deal with that? Economics. All of a sudden, people cannot afford to eat and are making these crazy decisions, and they're worried about that. You're worried about your health. You're worried about your finances. You're worried about, are your kids okay in school, or is somebody going to come in and do something crazy and all of a sudden you don't have your child? There is so much happening that even 10 years ago was unthinkable. And when you factor that into where we are today, I don't think it's any wonder that cases are being it's more prevalent, or it's more talked about. Of course it is. This is new territory we're walking here. This is brand new things that we've never encountered or have a playbook how to deal with it. So, I mean, having these conversations, and even, talking to people, talking to a friend, talking to a family member, and being able to bounce ideas off something is critical at this point in time. Having a counselor who could, give you the tools or give you the support or information to be able to make a clear decision on some of these things. I can't think of a better time than right now than to get access to this stuff. It's
talk about stressors and being bombarded with stressors. Chris, you being a store manager, my team managed COVID testing throughout the pandemic, like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 3 years. And I remember calling all these people and speaking to everyone and talk about stressors, right? And one day you have to wear a mask this color, and then the next day it's this color, and then no gloves. It was such a mess. So talk about being bombarded with things that you don't even have time to assimilate and take a breath. And you're already like 14 steps ahead. So there is no way to prepare for this. No. And then after the post-COVID piece is like, you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. So that lasted for a little while, right? I think we all had like a period of time where, is this really over? Or, what's coming, right? So there was that kind of feeling that always kind of loomed over us as a society. And that will linger. And that has probably branded a couple of people in our community. Our kids, they're growing, they're becoming, adults. They had a period of 3 years where there was no socialization. There was no, going to school dances and graduations and all these losses that you go through when you're a teenager or a young adult will impact you and how you cope with stuff in the future. So I expect this mental health management to be a little bit more difficult for the next little while, because we've seen stuff that never happened in the past, and now we just need to make sure that we deal with it appropriately. And I feel that we have the resources available. We just need to get it out there.
Right. I think another thing.
Go ahead, Chris.
Bubble up. Talk about unprecedented. We have lots of folks from international applicants that apply to our stores, and some of these folks have seen some stuff. Some Ukrainian applicants, for example, some of the stories that they tell me. Some real horror stories of war and how their family are coping and what they're dealing with. Other folks who, are feeding a family in India based on the pay that they get at our store. You know what I mean? Imagine all the stress that we have here, and now you combine it with my family's not okay in the Ukraine because of a war, or my family is not doing well in India because we can't afford to eat and we're relying on you to help us out. That's big stuff. That's big stuff. That's our time.
Yeah. And that's heavy.
That's heavy.
That's stuff that we didn't have to deal with before. We have a very diverse population, and people are dealing with all sorts of things. So it's not just like what's going on in our little yard, it's what's going on globally. We have access to everything at the tip of our fingers. So if you want to be stressed out, you listen to CNN, you're going to be stressed out. Like if that's what you want to do, 100%, right? So we just need to make sure that whatever we can handle, whatever we can, cope with, that's what we need to be able to put on our plates. But we also have to remember that we're in a workforce, and sometimes people put extra stuff on our plates. So we just need to figure out how to manage all of that so it doesn't get overwhelming.
I think about everything we've been talking about, and I think the biggest problem that because of mental health and COVID and everything is that I think we forgot to take time for ourselves. And that's another stigma, is that if you do try to take care of yourself, self-care, that you're selfish. But if you don't give yourself that, you can't cope then. You have no ability to cope with any of these stressors that are coming at you. I like to listen to music. I like to shut everything down and just throw on the radio and just forget about something for a second. And I'm not talking about like radio. I'm like Spotify or something where it's just music streaming. So I don't have to hear the news. So I can just hear the music and just for 10 minutes. And I think that's another thing is like people think self-care is this elaborate thing, and it can be, a great bubble bath and, a little bit of tea or whatever and read a book. But sometimes just 10 minutes can get your brain to shut down in all that negativity that's coming at you. And you can just remember there are good things out there sometimes. Even just for that moment of that person made this and it's beautiful and I'm glad I get to listen to it. I'm not thinking about the stressors. I'm not thinking about my own mental illnesses or what's going on with my family or the families across the world. We think globally, and it's too much sometimes. I mean, Natalie, when you think of self-care, do you have any like main self-care tips that might help others, that maybe just some simple things that they could help out?
Yeah, well, to your point, I mean, if you don't take care of yourself, you will never be able to take care of anybody else. So, and that includes your workload or what your colleagues are asking you to help with. If you don't have the capacity to protect your own well-being and your happiness by taking care of yourself during periods of stress, you'll fail. You're setting yourself up to fail. So a couple of things that you can do for self-care, and to your point, April, it doesn't need to be like I'm going to book a spa day and, take, 4 weeks of vacation. It could be just reading a couple of lines in a book. It could be just stepping away, going outside, bring your dog for a little bit of a walk around the block, and you're back to your office. It may be setting goals. So that you're not overwhelmed. It may be using your calendar, that just, shuffling things around in your calendar. It could be learning a new skill. So you have difficulty. A stressor would be, for me, like Excel. Excel is like the worst thing for me. And I always try to learn about it when I have a little bit of time, but it is a stressor for me. So if I learn about it, eventually it won't be a stressor anymore. So that's kind of a form of self-care. You can connect with a friend. You can just call a friend up for like 5 minutes, say, I'm having a bad part of my day and I just want to vent. And that could be a bit of self-care. Exercise is great. I'm a CrossFitter, so I do CrossFit 5 days a week. I started that during COVID because first of all, I was isolated and I didn't see anyone. So when we were able to start seeing a little bit of people, I also found that, I took care of everybody during COVID and left myself on the side. And now I decided that, I'm important for myself. So, and it's not selfish. It's actually very selfless, because now I know that if I'm taking care of myself, I got everything else left for everybody else, right? If I didn't take care of myself, I don't have space for you. So that's selfish. So, so I make time where it fits. And for me, it fits at 6 o'clock in the morning. So it doesn't really impact anybody, but it does a world of good for myself. So, you could, setting boundaries. Setting boundaries is also something good for self-care. You could explore a new neighborhood. You can, go for a bike ride, and instead of doing your your regular routine, you go somewhere else, like all different things where you get different perspectives and new relationships, or you get to speak to somebody new, or you learn something new. It's always something that your brain kind of triggers another part of your brain where you're learning, and it does help you with relaxing and taking your mind off of all of that cortisol that's trying to flood your brain. Couple of tips.
I like those. And the cortisol, I don't think people understand that it's almost like like a drug in your brain, and it's the stress drug. That's how I call it. And I got to be honest, my cortisol levels was through the roof for years, and I didn't understand why. Not until I got my diagnoses with my mental illnesses. I do have PTSD with generalized anxiety, and cortisol is just, it's bad for you. It's good when you need it because it gets you going. It's like adrenaline. It gets your body moving because you need to move.
If you're faced with a dragon,
Yeah.
not if you're faced with I need to sell 2,000 bananas by Friday, right? That's the difference between fight or flight and the cortisol response. So yes, stress is good. I'm not saying stress is not good. Stress is important because it's what motivates us to move forward and to achieve. But when that stress is overwhelming and it prevents you from moving forward, that's where it becomes a problem.
Right.
And that's when you need to step back for a moment and take care of yourself.
Yep.
Really appreciate that. I know that Loblaw has so many resources to help us help ourselves. That self-care, like you said, take 10 minutes to read through an article just to understand, what is going on with the biases and the stigmas out there. What we can do to be better toward others, treat others with kindness. But what can we do to help us?
So we have tons of resources, and this is my favorite part because we're very passionate about this topic on my team. So we have My Mind Matters on Flip that is accessible to everyone. So it's accessible to the individuals in the company and also the managers. So there's two different parts to the website. So if you're an individual and you're looking for support on anxiety, let's say, then there's an article on anxiety that will tell you exactly what the signs and symptoms are, what to look out for, what you should be doing next. And it gives you also a list of resources. And we developed this hub, if you want, because we don't want people to go looking for Dr. Google and, being diagnosed by Google and then, realizing that, oh my God, I might be very, very ill. Let's start by accessing information that has been vetted through the experts in the company, which is my team for mental health. And we make sure that we direct you to the right source. So if you need to access care, here are the appropriate resources that you should be accessing. So My Mind Matters has tons of different articles that will help on different topics. So anger, violence, it could be, there's nutrition in there. There's all sorts of things that you can access. It also has the links to our external resources. So TELUS Health being our EFAP program. And they are there to support us always, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It is a confidential program. You have access to a counselor immediately if you are in an acute situation. Always do 911, call 911 if there is a situation where somebody's safety is at risk. But if you're in a crisis and there is no risk, then you can access a counselor immediately with TELUS Health. And they have support for all sorts of things. So we were talking about financial stressors at the beginning of this podcast. They have support for financial. They can help you develop a budget, help you, kind of figure out all your finances. There's legal sessions that you can have. So contact with somebody that's in the legal field that can help you maneuver through some, I don't know, you're selling your house and then there's a conflict with your neighbor and that's stressing you out. Then there's that resource. Nutrition, elder care, all sorts of different subjects that we have to deal with as individuals, because most of us are in a sandwich generation. So we have kids, we have elderly parents, stressors, they're just piling up everywhere. So we have resources available through TELUS that can answer to all of those different stressors. We have a link to LifeSpeak as well. So not everybody wants to pick up a phone or go to a counselor's office and talk about their problems. So LifeSpeak is a library of videos on multiple different topics where you can do your self-learning. So I want to learn. So my child is on the spectrum of autism. And I don't know where to start. I need to learn a little bit more about this. Then there is a suite that will, a group of videos on the library that will help you kind of go through all of the different steps and will direct you to where you need to go next. So different topic. It could be anxiety, again, all like elder care. Your child is having issues with food. So whether it's, any anorexia or anything like a food disorder, there are tons of different information on that library. And I recommend that we at least just go take a peek, because we can use it, but also our family members can use it. So if somebody needs extra help in learning something, then that would be the site that I would recommend we use. When there is risk, I talked about harm or risk of suicide. Always there's 911, but we also have a new number in Canada which is 988, which is the suicide hotline. It works everywhere in Canada, so I would recommend that we promote that if we do have people that are at risk in our entourage. The leader in your store or in your facility should have access to all of these resources, but they might be the best person to reach out to. HR, if you have HR close to you. We have all the policies that are on Flip as well that people can access. If you know who your medical services occupational health nurse is, then you're a lucky person and you can pick up the phone and call them. They'll help you go through that. And there's also DE&I that have links to different resources that could be helpful for people that are struggling with all sorts of other biases that could increase stress, etc. Your family doctor, your therapist, your friend, that's trusted friend in the community. There's all sorts of your hospital. There's CAMH, there's CMHA, there's Mood Disorders Society of Canada. Like the real good email addresses on Google are fine to access once you know what's going on, right? So basically, but I wouldn't want anybody to rub like tea leaves under their feet because they saw on on Google that will help with psychosis, right? So those are the things that we're trying to prevent. So we want like science-based information that is at everybody's fingertips, that has been vetted through and is that has been tested and true. So
Nice.
I really
Excellent.
appreciate you coming in and talking to us today, Natalie. Is there anything else that you would like to add today?
no, just I think I would say let's keep talking about this very, very important topic. Let's try to make people comfortable with the topic. Let's try to make people that are not comfortable with the topic comfortable with the topic. So whether that's, just commenting if they are being stigmatizing in any way, and pushing them through different learning modules that we have already on Academy that they can access, or reaching out to the medical services team, because we also offer a one-day mental health program for leaders that is very, very well done, that gives exactly all the tools that we need to help somebody who's going through a mental health issue. And I would recommend you reach out to our team if that's something of interest.
Nice. April, what else we got coming up? What's next on the podcast?
We're actually going to revisit Ready, Willing, and Able.
Right.
Is an amazing program throughout Loblaw, partnering with I believe it's autistic and getting them good jobs.
Nice. Really, really good. So lots to come. But anyway, for right now, we'll draw the curtain across this particular podcast. For April Ramhit, for Nathalie Gervais, and Chris Bailey, thank you for joining us, everybody, here on Pod Able, and we'll see you again after a while.